everyone, my name is Lucy and today I'm going to be talking about my most disappointing reads of 2020. I did make a video about my favourite books of 2020, so I will link that down below. So just a quick disclaimer, I have some unpopular opinions. Some of these books are hyped books that I just didn't enjoy for various reasons. And if you love these books, that's totally okay. I'm not saying these books are bad, these are just my personal thoughts. And we all have different opinions when reading, and that's totally okay. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is the first book that I read this year, and it's a YA sci-fi set on Mars, and there are different groups of people. Some are below others in this system, and some people work in the mines, and it's a very dangerous role. They don't have a choice in it, and this teenage boy who is the main character works in the mines, and then something happens and there's a rebellion. So it's kind of like the Hunger Games in that way. So I DNF'd this book because I really didn't like what happened in the plot. I didn't like the main character and I just didn't enjoy the book. I just wasn't enjoying it. I didn't like the writing style. It just wasn't for me. And that's quite unfortunate because I know a lot of people love this series. So let me know if you also didn't enjoy this book, because I don't know if I'm the only one. The next book is one that I did enjoy, but I did have some issues with it. I expected it to be a 5-star and it was about 4. So that was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. So I did really enjoy this book, but I had some issues with it. It was very, very slow. Like, it didn't need to be that slow, I feel. And I listened to this on audiobook, so that did help me to read it. And I did enjoy the story, but it was just way too slow. So that was unfortunate. Trigger warnings here for animal death and child abuse. I will link my blog review down below because I wrote it all in detail on there. But this book follows Fitz, who is the illegitimate son of the prince, and he is given to the king when he's about 6 years old because his grandfather doesn't want him to live with him anymore. And he grows up being treated not very well, but he does live in the castle and he is looked after by the stable master, and then later on he is trained to be an assassin. Another issue I had is that when I was looking at information on the next 2 books, because I wasn't really interested in reading the next 2, it just seemed very predictable. I don't know if that's just me. There's been a few books this year that I've just felt were very predictable, so I wasn't really interested in reading the rest of the series. But I am going to be reading Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, which I hear is a bit faster in pace, but it is a massive book. I hear it's a bit gloomy, so I'm going to see how I feel about that. I have read a bit of it before, so I am hoping to get to that again soon and see what I think. I'm hoping that I like more of her books. It's just that this series just wasn't for me. I found it interesting, but I'm just not interested in continuing with the series. So the next book is After Dark by Haruki Murakami. So I really love Murakami books. I've read Norwegian Wood and Sputnik Sweetheart, and Murakami is a very interesting writer. Whenever I read his books, I feel like I've read something that's epic. His books are kind of set in real life, but there are like kind of magical realism elements to them as well. And they're usually open-ended, so you can kind of guess what happened for yourself, and there are dark elements in his book. So this book is set overnight. This girl is in a cafe and she meets this boy who she met when she was younger, and there's something wrong with her sister. Her sister is just asleep in a room, and it's really weird. There's like someone on the TV, and then we kind of read from someone like viewing this scene. So the way it was written was quite different to his other books that I've read. There are some different stories that were going on within this book. I just didn't really love it. It was okay, but it just wasn't as good as his other books that I've read. There wasn't as much to it, and we didn't really find out too much about what was going on. I wanted to find out more. So yeah, I just didn't enjoy this book as much as his others, and I gave it 3 stars, I believe. So I will be trying his other books, but this one just wasn't the best. Next book is not this book, but the sequel. So Vengeful by B. Schwab. So I read the ebook for Vengeful. I really loved Vicious when I read it a few years ago. Those 2 characters who are in university, and they discover that people can obtain superpowers when they have a near-death experience, and other elements that happen. So major trigger warnings here for suicide and self-harm. The first book was pretty good. There was a good rivalry in it, characters with some different powers, so it was quite good. I remember enjoying it when I read it. But I read Vengeful this year and I just didn't enjoy it. We get introduced to a new villain who is quite powerful, and there are other characters we meet, and there's some of the same characters. We find out more of the backstory of one of the original characters. There is also the continuing police organisation that is trying to hunt down all of these people. So I didn't really enjoy the sequel because, for one of the main characters went completely against the morals that he had in the first book, which was very strange, and it just felt like a very gloomy book to me. I didn't love any of the characters. I didn't really feel attached to any of them. There was one character that I did quite like, but it was kind of slow going, not much was happening, and I can't really tell you what really happened in the plot. It was kind of like a few things happened, but it was just not great for me. I just didn't love it. So yeah, this was a disappointing read. And another book is actually another book by V. Schwab, which is A Darker Shade of Magic. So I have tried to read this a couple of times in the past, and this time I went with the audiobook because I really wanted to try this series, but I just wasn't enjoying it before. And yeah, I did not enjoy it again. So this is a fantasy book where there are 4 different types of London. So there's like parallel Londons. One is Black London, where magic overtook it and no one can go there anymore. And there's one London that is like Oz, so there's no magic. There's another one where there was magic and it doesn't exist anymore. And there's another one where there is a lot of magic. And Kel, the main character, comes from this red London where there is a lot of magic. And he is one of the few people that can go between the Londons. And he goes between them and delivers letters between the monarchy, and he takes items from these different Londons and brings them back, which he's not supposed to do. And I just didn't love this book. I didn't like the characters, similar to Vengeful as well. I feel like this may be a theme with her books. I don't feel attached to the characters, and the story just was not that interesting to me. There are some villains here for self-harm and violence. There are some gory scenes in this, dark in places, but there wasn't really much going on with the plot. There's a thief as well, but I didn't find her very interesting. Yeah, I just did not feel attached to the characters. I didn't really care about the plot. I found the premise quite intriguing, but I just decided that it wasn't worth me continuing with the series because I just wasn't that bothered. I'd rather spend my time reading other books that I really enjoy instead. So I decided to DNF this one too. So the last book is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I listened to this on audiobook as well. So this is a book that's set in a world like our own, but there are magical beings and there are orphanages for magical children. And the main character works in this government organisation that reviews the orphanages. And he gets sent to this orphanage where there are some strange children and they are meant to be considered quite dangerous. And everyone in the area is prejudiced against magical beings. The main character is quite a grumpy character. He doesn't really have much in his life apart from his job, and he has a cat. And he meets these children and he starts to change. And there is a romance between him and the orphanage master. So I was really excited to read this book because it sounded really interesting. But in reality for me, it was way too cheesy. I like a bit of cheese, but it was too much for me. It was just really sickly sweet, every single sentence. And although the powers were interesting, it was really interesting discovering what the different children were. I found that the best part of the story. But it was just too sweet. It was too much for me. And the main character was annoying. He was grumpy, and Orphanage Master was too perfect. He didn't really seem to have any flaws, which didn't really seem realistic for a character. So I just wasn't enjoying this book, although I found the idea of magical children really interesting, and I kind of wanted to see how things changed. but ultimately for me, I just couldn't continue with the book because I really wasn't enjoying the writing. So those are all of the books that I found disappointing this year. I did have a mixed reading year. I tried some different genres and I discovered books that I just didn't really enjoy, and there weren't many books that I absolutely loved. Hoping that next year I will find more books that I love. Please let me know the books that you found disappointing this year, and if you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them. And I will leave all my links down below if you would like to check them out. And thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you in another video soon. Goodbye.